She trembled on her wedding night, but her millionaire husband's touch told a different story. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. It was snowing hard that night in Aspen, the kind of snow that muffles every sound and makes the world look like a painting. Inside the Grand Rains estate, light spilled through tall windows onto a marble floor that gleamed like ice. The air was thick with silence, broken only by the faint crackle of the fireplace and the steady tick of an antique clock. At the center of the room stood Charlotte Reed, wearing a white dress she did not choose, holding a bouquet that did not feel like hers. Across from her was Jack Rains, 35, tall, composed, the kind of man who carried silence like a weapon. He looked every bit the millionaire air people whispered about: wealthy, mysterious, untouchable. Yet tonight, under the dim chandelier, his eyes were unreadable. The justice of the peace cleared his throat. "Do you, Jack Rains, take this woman?" "I do," Jack interrupted quietly, his voice firm but hollow. Charlotte's breath caught. She did not remember agreeing to this. Not really, not the way brides do. Her signature had been scrawled across a thick folder earlier that afternoon, right after she had fled a motel, right after someone had tried to run her off the icy road. She had been shaking when Jack offered her a strange deal: "Marry me, and you will be safe." Most women would have laughed. But she had seen the way his hand trembled when he lit a match, the faint scar slicing across his palm. Something about him was broken too. And maybe that was why she said yes. The vows ended before her mind caught up. A gold band slid onto her finger, cool and heavy. The witnesses signed, the official left, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Jack turned toward her. "You are safe now," he said. "That is all that matters." She wanted to believe him, but every instinct screamed that nothing about this marriage was safe. When they stepped into the corridor, thunder rolled over the mountains. At the far end, a woman's portrait hung: Jack's late brother's wife, they said. The resemblance made Charlotte's heart jolt. The same dark hair, the same frightened eyes. For a second, she could swear the woman in the painting was staring back at her. "Who is she?" Charlotte whispered. Jack's jaw tightened. "Do not ask questions tonight." Quote. He walked ahead, and she followed, her heels echoing against the marble. Somewhere in the walls, wind howled like a warning. Every candle flickered. The house felt too alive, too aware of her presence. Later, when she entered the master bedroom, she stopped cold. On the bedside table lay the contract she had signed, its pages slightly torn, as if someone had tried to read it before her. Beside it sat a single envelope marked in red ink. For Charlotte, "Do not open until morning." Quote. Her hands shook. She had not written her name like that. Outside, the storm raged louder. She could hear Jack's footsteps retreat down the hall. For the first time that night, she wondered if she had just married a savior or signed her way into a trap. Lightning flashed, illuminating the window. Her reflection wavered in the glass-white dress, pale skin, eyes wide with something between fear and disbelief. And somewhere deep inside the mansion, a door creaked open by itself. Charlotte froze. Her heart pounded. Was this house protecting her or warning her? Snow still fell over Aspen the next morning, thick and relentless, as if the storm refused to leave until it had washed the world clean. Inside the Rains estate, silence hung like a curtain. The fire had burned down to ash, and Charlotte Reed woke in a bed far too large for one person. The white comforter smelled faintly of cedar and something unfamiliar: Jack's cologne. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then her gaze caught the envelope on the bedside table. For Charlotte, "Do not open until morning." The red ink looked darker now, almost brown. Her fingers hovered over it, uncertain if she should obey or not. When she finally tore it open, a single line of writing stared back at her. "Trust no one in this house, not even me." Her breath hitched. The handwriting was Jack's, or at least it looked like his. She glanced toward the door, half expecting him to appear, but the hallway beyond was empty. Charlotte slipped the note into her coat pocket, her heartbeat loud in the stillness. She pushed open the bedroom door and stepped into the corridor. The storm outside had softened into a light flurry, but the house remained dim, almost watchful. Downstairs, she found Jack standing by the massive window, a cup of black coffee in his hand. He looked as if he had been awake all night. The gray light of dawn cut across his face. carving sharp lines under his eyes. "You read it," he said quietly, not turning around. She froze. "You mean the note?" He nodded once. "It was not meant to frighten you. It was meant to remind you that this marriage protects both of us, but it also paints a target on our backs." "Who would want to hurt us?" she asked. Jack turned then, setting the cup down on the piano behind him. "Not us. Me. You are just collateral if I fail." Quote. His tone was calm, but something in his eyes flickered guilt, maybe, or sorrow. Charlotte wanted to ask more, but he had already walked past her, saying only, "Breakfast is ready in the east dining room." The mansion was larger than she remembered from last night. She followed him through halls lined with old portraits, men and women who all carried the same cold expression. It felt like walking through generations of judgment. In the dining room, 2 plates waited. Bacon, eggs, toast, all perfectly arranged, but Charlotte could barely eat. Jack sat at the far end of the long table, reading a newspaper she was sure had not been delivered that morning. Finally, she asked, "Why me, Jack? Out of everyone you could have chosen, why marry a woman you barely know?" He folded the paper slowly, eyes never leaving her. "Because you were the only one who asked for the truth instead of the money." The answer silenced her. He stood, gathering his jacket. "You will have a car and driver to take you into town this afternoon. Do not go anywhere alone, and do not talk to reporters." Charlotte frowned. "Reporters? I was one, remember?" "That is exactly why you need to be careful," he replied. "They do not forget faces, Charlotte, especially faces that once accused me of murder." Her fork slipped from her hand and clattered onto the china plate. "You knew?" "I always knew," he said simply, walking toward the door. "That is why I chose you. Go." When the door closed behind him, she sat frozen. Every part of her wanted to run, but another part, a quieter, braver part, wanted to know the truth. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the note again. The handwriting looked less certain in the daylight, almost shaky. If Jack had written it, why warn her against him? And if he had not, who else inside this house could have slipped it onto her table? A gust of wind rattled the window panes. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang once, then stopped. Charlotte rose, determined. The story was not over, not for her. She had entered this marriage to stay alive. But now she was beginning to realize something far more dangerous. In the Rains estate, safety might be the biggest lie of all. The morning drifted into a pale afternoon, and the snow outside the Rains estate turned into a thin mist that wrapped around the windows like breath. Charlotte Reed stood in the hallway, staring at her reflection in one of the tall mirrors. She looked like a woman in someone else's life, dressed in silk, surrounded by walls that whispered about power and secrets. She walked toward the library where she had seen Jack disappear earlier. The door was half open. Inside, the air smelled of old books, wood polish, and faint smoke. Jack sat behind a mahogany desk, a file spread open before him. He did not look up when she entered. "Do you always read confidential documents in front of your new wife?" Charlotte asked, her voice softer than she meant it to be. Jack looked up, one eyebrow raised. "Only when my new wife is a journalist who cannot stop investigating everything." "I am not investigating," she said, even though they both knew it was a lie. He closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. "Then, what are you doing wandering around my house, Charlotte?" "I am trying to understand what I have walked into." Quote. Jack studied her for a long moment, then rose and crossed the room. He stopped beside her, close enough that she could see the faint line of that scar on his hand again. "You have walked into survival," he said quietly, "for both of us." His tone was not threatening, but it carried a weight that made her chest tighten. Before she could reply, a knock echoed on the doorframe. Daniel Brooks, Jack's attorney, stepped in. His gray suit looked out of place against the dark wood. "Jack, the board meeting has been moved up. You will need to address the investors this evening." Jack nodded. "We will be there." Daniel's eyes flicked toward Charlotte, polite but cautious. "Mrs. Rains, it will be your first public appearance as Jack's wife. The press will be watching closely. I suggest you keep your answers short if anyone asks about the marriage." Charlotte forced a smile. "Do you expect them to ask if I am real?" Daniel hesitated. "They will ask everything, Mrs. Rains, especially because you used to accuse him." When he left, Jack turned to her. "You heard him. Tonight will not be easy. Do you think you can manage?" Charlotte drew a slow breath. "I have stood in front of worse crowds." Jack's lips curved in a faint, reluctant smile. "I believe you." Hours later, she stood before the mirror again, this time in an emerald green gown that shimmered under the golden lights of the ballroom. The driver waited outside. Jack adjusted his tie in silence beside her. For a moment, their eyes met in the mirror. There was a flicker of something: tension, fear, or maybe the start of understanding. The car ride to the hotel was quiet. Aspen's streets were lined with lights, the snow reflecting them like tiny stars. Charlotte's heart thudded in rhythm with the tires against the road. She could feel Jack's presence beside her, steady and unreadable. When they entered the ballroom, conversations dimmed. Cameras flashed. People smiled too wide. Charlotte felt hundreds of eyes following her every move. She could almost hear the whispers. Is that her? The reporter? The one who called him a murderer? Jack placed a hand lightly at her back, guiding her through the crowd. Just breathe, he murmured. Do not let them see you shake. She nodded, keeping her chin high. They moved toward the stage, where reporters waited. A woman in a red dress stepped forward, microphone in hand. Mr. Rains, congratulations on your marriage. Many say it happened rather suddenly. Would you like to tell us how you met your wife? Jack's gaze lingered on Charlotte before he answered. Sometimes life gives you the right person at the wrong time, he said smoothly. And sometimes, you just have to sign the contract anyway. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Charlotte smiled, though her pulse raced. The reporter turned to her. And you, Mrs. Rains? Was it love at first sight? Charlotte's voice was steady. It was something stronger than love, she said. It was necessity. The room fell silent for half a second before polite applause broke out. Later, as the music swelled and couples began to dance, Charlotte leaned close to Jack. You planned that answer, did you not? He met her eyes, expression unreadable. Of course. Everything in this life is a plan. Quote. For the first time, she wondered if his plan included her at all, or if she was just another part of the performance. What about you? Would you ever marry someone knowing it was just a deal? The night after the gala felt longer than any night before. The sound of applause and camera flashes still echoed in Charlotte Reed's mind long after she and Jack Rains had returned to the estate. The image of his calm smile under those bright lights refused to fade. He had played his role perfectly, the powerful husband, the charming heir, but behind that performance, something in his eyes had looked almost hollow. Charlotte sat on the edge of her bed, still in her gown, staring at her reflection in the vanity mirror. The emerald fabric shimmered under the lamp, a color too beautiful for a night built on lies. She unpinned her hair slowly, trying to quiet the thoughts that refused to rest. The house seemed to breathe around her, every creak and sigh a reminder that she was living in a place that did not belong to her. Down the hall, a faint sound broke the silence, a door closing, followed by footsteps, heavy, measured. She stood and stepped into the hallway. The air was cold, scented faintly of rain and smoke. She followed the sound until it led her to the library. The door was slightly ajar again, a line of light spilling across the floor. Inside, Jack was standing by the fireplace, his jacket off, sleeves rolled up. Papers were scattered across the desk. His tie hung loose around his neck, and the controlled poise he had shown earlier was gone. You are awake, he said without looking up. I could not sleep, Charlotte replied. You left the party without saying a word. What happened? He poured a drink into a glass, the amber liquid catching the firelight. Richard Vale happened, he said. He asked about you. Quote. Charlotte frowned. The board member? What did he want? Jack looked at her then, his expression unreadable. He wanted to know why I married you so quickly. He wanted to know what you have on me. Her pulse quickened. What I have on you? He took a slow sip of his drink. He believes you have information about the accident, the one that killed my brother. Charlotte froze. Does he think I caused it? Jack's voice softened. No, he thinks you can prove who did. Gooden. The fire popped loudly, filling the pause between them. Charlotte crossed the room, stopping beside the desk. Do you believe that too? She asked quietly. Jack looked down at the papers. I believe you are the only one who keeps asking questions that could get you hurt. Charlotte studied his face, the lines of exhaustion and pain etched deep. Maybe I am the only one who actually wants to know the truth. He met her gaze then, and for a heartbeat, the air between them shifted. The firelight danced in his eyes, and something unspoken flickered: trust, fear, maybe even a spark of longing. Without another word, Jack stepped closer. The space between them disappeared, and for a moment, Charlotte forgot why she was afraid. His hand brushed against hers, warm, steady, almost hesitant. You are trembling again, he said softly. I am not, she whispered, but her voice betrayed her. Jack smiled faintly. You do not have to be afraid of me, Charlotte. Quote. The sound of her name in his voice was disarming. She looked up at him, trying to find the truth behind his calm tone. Then, as suddenly as he had softened, He stepped back, his expression shuddering. "You should rest," he said. "Tomorrow will be worse. The board will come for answers." She nodded, though her mind was far from rest. As she turned to leave, something on the desk caught her eye, a single photograph tucked halfway under a folder. It showed 3 men standing in front of a cable car. One of them was Jack, another was his brother, the third was Richard Vale. Charlotte looked at the photo, her stomach tightening. The caption at the bottom read, "Rains Resort groundbreaking, 1 week before the accident." She looked up to find Jack watching her. "Good night, Charlotte," he said, voice low. But his eyes held a warning. That night, as she lay awake, the firelight fading to shadows, Charlotte could not shake the thought that the truth she was chasing might be much closer than she imagined, and far more dangerous than she was ready to face. The next morning came gray and cold, with snow still hanging over Aspen like a secret that refused to melt. Charlotte Reed woke before sunrise, the echo of last night's conversation playing again in her mind. Jack's voice, calm and unreadable, had followed her into her dreams. "You do not have to be afraid of me." She rose from the bed, dressed quietly, and made her way down the long corridor toward the library. The house felt too still, as if every painting on the walls was listening. When she reached the library door, she paused. The papers on the desk were gone. The photograph, the one that showed Jack, his brother, and Richard Vale, had disappeared as well. A faint movement caught her attention. The maid, an older woman named Helen, stood at the far end of the hall, holding a tray of coffee. "Good morning, Mrs. Rains," Helen said gently. "Mr. Rains left early for his meeting in town. He said you should stay indoors today." Charlotte forced a polite smile. "Did he mention when he will return?" Helen shook her head. "No, ma'am. But he asked me to remind you to lock the doors. He said the storm brought more than snow this time." The words lingered long after Helen walked away. More than snow. Charlotte returned to the library and began searching the shelves, running her fingers over the spines of books, looking for something, anything that could explain the note, the missing papers, or Jack's warning. Behind a row of old ledgers, she found a small black box. It was locked, but the latch was loose enough to pry open. Inside were several USB drives and a folded document bearing the Rains Company's seal. She unfolded it carefully. It was a financial statement, one that listed Richard Vale as the majority shareholder of Rains Alpine Resorts after the date of Jack's brother's death. Charlotte stared at the numbers, her heart pounding. If this document was real, it meant that Richard had gained control of the company right after the accident. That could not have been coincidence. She slipped the paper and one of the drives into her coat pocket just as a sound came from behind her, a sharp click. She turned. The library door was closing. "Helen?" she called. No answer. The click came again. The lock. Someone had turned it from the outside. Charlotte's breath quickened. She moved to the window, but it was sealed tight. She was trapped. For a few seconds she stood frozen, listening to the faint hum of the wind outside. Then she forced herself to think. She found the old landline phone on the desk and lifted the receiver. The line was dead. She was not sure how long she paced before she heard footsteps again. The door opened suddenly, and Jack stood there, snow still melting from his coat. "Charlotte," he said sharply. "Why are you in here?" She met his gaze. "Because someone locked me inside." His brow furrowed. "Locked you? Who?" "I do not know," she said. "But if you did not want me to find this..." She pulled the folded document from her pocket and placed it on the desk. "Then you should not have hidden it here." Quote. Jack's eyes narrowed as he scanned the paper. "Where did you find this?" "In your house," she said. "The one where everything disappears the moment I get close to the truth." He exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. "You do not understand what you are holding." "Then make me understand," she said. "Because right now, it looks like Richard Vale had more to gain from your brother's death than anyone." Jack's gaze softened just slightly. "You think I do not know that?" Charlotte hesitated. The silence stretched between them, heavy with all the words neither of them had said. Finally, he spoke again, quieter. "I'm trying to protect you, Charlotte. There are things in this house and in this company that will destroy anyone who looks too closely." Her voice trembled, but she held her ground. "Then, you should have never brought me here." He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said, "It is too late for that." Quote. As he walked past her, the paper still in his hand, Charlotte realized that for the first time, she was no longer afraid of Jack Rains. She was afraid of the truth he was trying so hard to bury. Outside, the wind howled against the glass, and deep inside the mansion, The clock struck 9 each chime, sounding like a countdown she could not stop. The following evening arrived heavy with silence. Snow had stopped falling, but the cold had only deepened, pressing against the windows like a warning. Charlotte Reed sat in the drawing room of the Raines estate, staring at the fire that refused to warm her hands. Jack Raines had not spoken to her since the confrontation in the library. He had locked himself in his office for most of the day, and the distance between them now felt wider than the entire mountain range outside. She heard his voice before she saw him. "You did not eat." "Good." Charlotte turned. Jack stood at the doorway, his expression unreadable. He looked tired, but there was a quiet resolve in his eyes that unsettled her more than anger ever could. "I was not hungry," she said. "You should be. Tomorrow is the board meeting. It will not be kind." Charlotte rose slowly. "You mean it will not be kind to you, or to me?" He hesitated. "Both?" The way he said it made her chest tighten. She wanted to ask what he was hiding, but before she could, he stepped closer. "Charlotte, whatever happens tomorrow, do not trust anyone in that room," he said. "Not even me." Her breath caught. "Then why should I go at all?" "Because if you are not there, they will destroy you in your absence," he said. "Richard Vale will not stop until you are gone." She studied him carefully. "You sound like you are warning me, not protecting me." "Maybe both," he said softly. Jack's voice was low, steady, but his eyes carried something different now, fear. Maybe for her, or maybe for what the truth would expose. For the first time since the wedding, Charlotte saw not the millionaire who controlled every room he entered, but a man carrying the weight of too many secrets. He reached into his jacket and handed her a small key. "Keep this with you. Do not ask what it opens until you have no other choice." Her fingers brushed his as she took it. The touch lingered longer than it should have. "You are trembling," he said quietly, echoing his words from that first night. "Not from fear," she whispered. Jack's mouth curved into the faintest smile, but his eyes did not follow. "Then you are braver than I am." A sound interrupted them, the shrill ring of the landline. Jack crossed the room and answered. His tone shifted immediately, low and controlled. Charlotte could not hear the words, but his jaw tightened with every second. When he hung up, he looked at her. "That was Daniel," he said. "The board knows about the documents you found. Someone leaked them." Charlotte's pulse raced. "Leaked them? I did not." "I know you did not," he interrupted. "But they will not believe that. They already think you are here to expose me." "Then tell them the truth," she said. "Tell them Richard was the one who took control after your brother's death. Tell them what you suspect." Jack turned away. "It is not that simple. The evidence you found it is not complete. If I accuse him now without proof, it will ruin us both." Charlotte took a step closer. "Then let me help you find the rest. You said you wanted to protect me. Let me protect you too." He looked at her, something unreadable flickering in his expression. "You have already done enough," he said. "More than you know." The words carried a strange finality, as if he was preparing for something inevitable. Later that night, as Charlotte lay in bed, she could not sleep. She turned the key over and over in her hand, wondering what door it belonged to, what truth it might unlock. She rose, pulled on her robe, and stepped quietly into the hallway. The mansion was dark except for the faint light spilling from under Jack's office door. She almost knocked, but stopped herself. Through the keyhole, she could see him at his desk, writing in a small notebook. For a moment, his face looked unguarded, weary, human. Then he closed the book, locked it in a drawer, and whispered something she could barely hear. "I am sorry, Charlotte." Those words followed her back to her room, echoing louder than the ticking clock. "Do you believe that secrets can ever protect the ones we love, or do they always destroy them in the end?" Morning came without sunlight. The sky above Aspen was a dull gray, heavy with clouds that threatened another storm. Inside the Raines estate, the quiet was suffocating. Charlotte Reed sat at the breakfast table, untouched coffee cooling beside her. She had not seen Jack since late last night. His apology, whispered through a locked door, still echoed in her head. Helen entered the room, her face pale. "Mrs. Raines, the car is waiting. Mr. Raines asked me to remind you that the board meeting starts in 1 hour." Charlotte nodded, forcing herself to breathe steadily. "Thank you, Helen. I will be ready." Quote. When she reached the front door, the same black sedan waited in the circular drive. Snow had started to fall again, small flakes swirling through the wind. The driver, a silent man with a dark coat and gloves, held the door open. Charlotte slid inside, clutching the small silver key Jack had given her the night before. The drive into town was long and tense. Aspen's streets looked deserted under the gray sky. As they approached the corporate building that bore the Rains name, Charlotte felt her heart tighten. She was not sure whether she was walking into a meeting or an ambush. Inside, the atmosphere was colder than the weather outside. Men in dark suits filled the glass conference room. At the head of the table sat Richard Vale, immaculate as always, his expression polite but sharp. Jack stood near the window, his hands clasped behind his back. When his eyes met Charlotte's, there was a flash of warning, subtle but clear. "Mrs. Rains," Richard said with a thin smile. "It is an honor to finally meet the woman who has caused so much discussion." Charlotte returned the smile. "Discussion can be healthy. It usually means the truth is close." A few men exchanged uneasy glances. Richard chuckled softly. "Truth is such a fragile thing in business. It breaks so easily under pressure." Jack's voice cut through the room. "Let us get to the point. What exactly are we discussing today?" Richard leaned back in his chair. "Transparency. Your wife seems to have found some rather sensitive documents in your home. Financial records, emails, things that should have remained private." Charlotte's stomach turned, but she kept her composure. "I found nothing that was not already buried in plain sight." Richard's smile faded slightly. "Perhaps, but leaking them to the press would be a grave mistake." Quote, "I did not leak anything," Charlotte said firmly. "If those documents are outside this building, someone else put them there." The tension thickened. Jack stepped forward, his tone calm but commanding. "Enough, Richard. If you have evidence, present it. If not, stop using my wife to cover your own tracks." The older man's eyes narrowed. "Careful, Jack. You are accusing the wrong person." Jack's jaw tightened. "Am I?" For a moment, no one spoke. The air seemed to hum with quiet hostility. Then Richard turned to Charlotte. "Mrs. Rains, may I ask, why did you agree to marry Jack so suddenly? Surely it was not love." Charlotte's pulse raced, but her voice stayed steady. "No, it was survival. Sometimes that is the same thing." A murmur ran through the room. Jack looked at her, and something in his expression softened. She saw gratitude there, or maybe sorrow. Richard rose, gathering his papers. "This meeting is over. The board will vote tomorrow on your position, Jack. Until then, I suggest you keep your house and your wife under control." When he left, silence followed. The other members filed out slowly, avoiding eye contact. Charlotte exhaled, her hands trembling. Jack turned toward her. "You handled that well," he said quietly. "I told the truth," she replied. "That should count for something." He studied her for a moment. "In this world, truth rarely counts. Power does." Close quote. As they left the building, snow began to fall harder, the wind rising around them. Charlotte gripped the small key in her coat pocket, feeling its weight like a heartbeat. Somewhere in that key lay the truth Jack was too afraid to tell, and she was beginning to understand that finding it might cost her everything. The storm hit Aspen before nightfall. Snow whipped against the windshield as the car climbed the road back to the Rains estate. Charlotte Reed sat in the back seat beside Jack, her hands clenched around the silver key. Neither of them had spoken since leaving the meeting. The silence between them carried more weight than any argument could. Halfway up the mountain, the car skidded slightly. The driver slowed, but Jack's gaze stayed fixed on the road ahead. "When we get home," he said quietly, "pack a small bag, just the essentials." Charlotte turned toward him. "Why? What happened at that meeting, Jack?" He hesitated. "Richard is not waiting for the vote. He wants control tonight." "Control of what?" she asked. "Everything," he said. "The company, the estate, the truth." The car pulled through the gates, tires crunching over the frozen gravel. The mansion stood dark except for one faint light in Jack's office window. As they stepped out, the cold hit them like a wall. The air smelled of pine and smoke. Inside, the silence felt heavier than ever. Jack locked the doors behind them. "Stay here," he said. "If anything happens, use the key. You will know where it fits." She caught his arm. "Jack, talk to me, please." He looked at her, the mask of control finally cracking. "I have spent years hiding things to protect the people I love. My brother, this company, and now you. But the truth does not stay buried forever." Before she could respond, the phone rang sharp and sudden. Jack crossed the room, answered, and froze. His face went pale. "Where?" he demanded. "How long ago?" When he hung up, he said only one word. "Helen." Charlotte's heart dropped. "What about her?" "She is gone," he said. "Her body was found near the base of the cable line." The room spun. Helen, the quiet woman who had served breakfast and warned her about the house, dead. "Who would do that?" Jack's voice was low. "The same person who killed my brother." Quote. Lightning flashed outside, followed by a crack of thunder that shook the windows. For a moment, everything went dark. When the lights flickered back on, Charlotte saw movement at the end of the hall, a shadow. Jack reacted first, pulling her close. "Go upstairs," he ordered. "Now." "Jack, go!" She ran, her breath echoing off the marble walls. The silver key burned cold in her palm. At the top of the stairs, she stopped. A faint draft brushed her face. One of the doors, half hidden behind a curtain, stood slightly open. Her pulse pounded. She fit the key into the lock. It turned easily. Inside was a small room filled with boxes, ledgers, and photographs, records of the Rains family that had never been seen. On the desk sat a single folder labeled in Jack's handwriting. "Accident report, confidential." Charlotte opened it. The first page showed the official report of the cable car tragedy. But the signature at the bottom was not Jack's. It was Richard Vale's. Downstairs, she heard shouting Jack's voice, then another she did not recognize. A crash followed. Charlotte's eyes filled with fear, but her hands tightened around the folder. The truth was finally in her grasp. And somewhere below, someone was willing to kill to keep it buried. The sound of shouting below grew louder. Charlotte Reed clutched the folder against her chest and stepped back from the desk. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. Another crash echoed from the main hall, followed by the unmistakable sound of glass breaking. She hurried down the narrow staircase, careful to stay in the shadows. From the landing, she could see Jack Rains standing in the foyer, facing Richard Vale. The older man held a pistol, his face twisted with fury. "You were supposed to stay quiet, Jack," Richard said. "You had everything: money, control, the name, but you had to go digging into the past." Jack's voice was calm, steady. "You killed my brother because he discovered the embezzlement, and now you killed Helen because she found out you were here last night." Richard's grip tightened. "You cannot prove that." "I can," Jack said. "The accident report was signed by you." Charlotte stepped forward, her voice trembling. "And now I can prove it too." Both men turned toward her. Richard's eyes widened when he saw the folder in her hands. "You should have stayed out of this, Mrs. Rains." Quote. Jack moved slightly, positioning himself between Charlotte and the gun. "You will not touch her." For a tense moment, no one spoke. The wind howled through the broken window, scattering snow across the marble floor. Then Richard laughed a short, bitter sound. "Do you really think the board will believe your little love story over my word?" Jack's jaw tightened. "They will when they see the recordings. Every call, every transaction. It is all backed up." Richard's expression faltered. "You are bluffing." Jack did not answer. His silence said enough. Richard raised the gun, but before he could fire, Charlotte threw the folder toward him. The papers burst into the air, distracting him for a split second, just long enough for Jack to tackle him to the ground. The gun went off, the sound deafening. A sharp pain cut through the air, followed by silence. Charlotte rushed forward. Richard lay unconscious, the gun sliding across the floor. Jack was on his knees, breathing hard, a streak of blood on his arm. "Are you hurt?" she whispered. He shook his head, managing a faint smile. "It is over, Charlotte." She helped him up, the adrenaline finally breaking into tears. "You could have been killed." He looked at her gently. "So could you." Sirens wailed in the distance. The storm outside had begun to break, dawn pushing through the clouds. Police lights reflected off the snow as officers entered the house. Hours later, after statements were taken and Richard was in custody, Charlotte stood by the window watching the sunrise. Jack joined her, his arm wrapped in a bandage. The quiet between them felt different now, peaceful, not fearful. He spoke softly. "When I asked you to marry me, I thought I was saving myself, but you were the one who saved me." She turned toward him. "We both saved each other." Outside, the first rays of sunlight spilled over the mountains, melting the last of the storm. The Rains estate, once a house of secrets, finally felt like home. If you were Charlotte, would you forgive Jack for everything he kept from you, or would you have walked away after the truth came out?